The strange thing about this house is that it never really gets to be quiet for long. Even when everyone insists they're just going to bed, the walls seem to invite drama the way a porch light invites moths. And on this particular stretch of days, it feels like the universe is lining up problems one after another, not even giving the family time to recover from the last argument before the next one barges through the door. It begins with the kind of late-night disturbance that should be none of their business, except it's loud enough to become everyone's business. The neighbors are fighting again, and the shouting is so intense, it's basically a live performance. The husband complains, half amused and half annoyed, while his wife tries to pretend she can sleep through it. But then the sound turns into action. There's a knock at the door, urgent and awkward, like someone has decided this household is the safest place to drop a crisis. It's the neighbor's son, shaken and desperate, asking for money so he can escape the chaos at home by staying in a motel. He isn't asking because he's irresponsible. He's asking because he's exhausted. His father is furious about his girlfriend, and the reason isn't about manners or behavior. It's about race, about an older man clinging to the idea that love has rules, and that those rules are his to enforce. The son is caught between love and loyalty, between wanting peace and wanting dignity. The hosts invite him in, and instantly their living room becomes a courtroom for a conflict they didn't create. The wife offers coffee and food, trying to calm the moment down. The husband tries to sound like a wise mediator, but his attempts to be helpful are tangled in his own biases and his need to be the loudest voice in the room. He says insensitive things, then immediately insists he's being fair, as if volume can replace empathy. The father eventually storms in, and when he does, the temperature jumps. He isn't coming to listen. He's coming to take control. He treats the argument like an issue of authority. His son belongs under his roof. His rules must be obeyed, and his opinions must be accepted. The mother follows behind him, exhausted and pleading, trying to keep the family from tearing itself apart. The conversation turns into a chaotic pileup of voices: anger, defensiveness, sarcasm, and fear. The son refuses to go back home, and that refusal is the first real crack in the father's certainty. It's one thing to command your family when everyone is trapped under your roof. It's another thing when your son chooses a neighbor's couch over your authority. That image humiliates the father, and humiliation is dangerous when pride is already running hot. So the son stays the night. The household becomes a temporary shelter, not because anyone planned it, but because reality forced it. Morning arrives with fragile calm, the kind that always feels like it could shatter if someone says the wrong sentence. The son is eating breakfast in borrowed clothes, trying to act normal even though nothing about this is normal. The mother is still hovering, trying to broker peace. The husband, who thinks he's the neighborhood philosopher, decides to give the boy a man-to-man talk and tells a long story from an old movie about pride and family and the way stubbornness can destroy relationships. He thinks he's delivering a lesson that will send the son home. But the son isn't naive. He takes the message and flips it. He uses it as leverage against his father, basically saying, "If you don't change, you'll lose me." The hosts realize, in real time, that the young man is emotionally sharper than the older adults who keep trying to control the narrative. When the father finally comes over again, he tries to apologize, but it comes out messy, loaded with conditions and pride protection. It's not the kind of apology that fully admits wrong. It's the kind that tries to soften the tone without changing the belief underneath. The son doesn't accept it immediately. He demands something simple but powerful. Stop using degrading language about the woman he loves. Stop turning her into a target. The father hesitates because giving up a word feels, to him, like giving up a worldview. But then the cost becomes real. Losing his son becomes a possibility he can finally feel in his bones, and that fear does what logic couldn't. It pushes him to bend. The reconciliation doesn't magically erase everything, but it lands as a step forward, a moment where pride loosens its grip just enough for the family to breathe. But the house doesn't get to rest. The story pivots to another kind of conflict, one that isn't shouted across porches but whispered through workplace alliances. A friend of the family needs a job, and the household patriarch steps in to help. His help is genuine on the surface, but it carries his usual need for control and credit. He wants to be seen as the hero, the one who made it happen. When she gets hired, it should be a victory, but the workplace turns it into a battleground because she isn't stepping into a quiet corner role. She's stepping into a physical, male-dominated environment where certain men treat their space like a private club. They complain about her presence as if her existence is disruption. They act like they can't be themselves anymore, as if decency is punishment. A petition forms to push her out, and suddenly the patriarch is trapped between his public image as her helper and the pressure of being accepted by the men he works with. Company leadership steps in with the cold practicality of business. They don't want trouble. They don't want scrutiny. They want stability. And they order the patriarch to shut down the harassment and destroy the petition. He does it, but the motivation is complicated. He's not suddenly transformed into a moral champion. He's following authority, protecting himself, and protecting the company. Still, the outcome matters. The woman stays. The petition collapses. The men lose the sense that they can rule the environment through intimidation alone. Then the story lands a sharper punch. Pay. The woman suspects she's being paid less than the man who held the job before, and she asks why. The patriarch leaps into a smug lecture about value and roles, until the truth hits him. She's making exactly what he's making. Equality isn't insulting when it's about someone else. It becomes uncomfortable when it reveals that your own status isn't as high as you pretend. The workplace conflict doesn't end with a grand moral victory. It ends with exposure. It reveals what many people don't want to admit, that some arguments about who deserves what are really just fear of losing superiority. From there, the mood turns deeper and strangely intimate. A funeral triggers anxiety about aging, legacy, and being forgotten. The patriarch, who usually hides vulnerability behind jokes and bluster, starts fixating on what happens after you're gone. Will anyone care? Will anyone remember? It isn't sentimental, it's anxious. And that anxiety bleeds upward into the young couple's marriage, where a major question detonates. Should they have children? The wife wants a baby, not as a casual idea, but as a deeply emotional desire to build a future, to create continuity, to feel like life is moving forward. The husband refuses, and his refusal isn't a joke. It's fear dressed up as logic. He talks about the world as unstable, about the future as uncertain, about raising children as irresponsible. To him, he's being protective. To her, it feels like betrayal. She thought they shared the same dream. He thought he was doing the responsible thing. The argument becomes a collision between hope and dread, between the desire to build life and the fear of what life might become. And once again, the older couple downstairs can't help getting pulled into it. They want grandchildren. They want a sense of continuation, a way to feel younger through the next generation, a way to imagine holidays and laughter that outlast them. Their longing adds pressure to the young couple's conflict because it turns a private marital debate into a family expectation. The wife feels supported by the desire for grandchildren. The husband feels trapped by it. The house fills with tension that doesn't have an easy solution because it's not about a simple choice. It's about how each person sees the world, what they believe the future holds, and whether love can survive when two people don't share the same definition of hope. Then, when you think the household has already reached its emotional limit, another crisis arrives, this time dressed up as something harmless and domestic. A home party meant to sell household products. It should be simple. Guests come over, the hostess smiles, items get shown, everyone leaves with small purchases and polite conversation. But the party becomes surreal because the patriarch is missing. He's supposed to be away at a convention, and he's supposed to call. He doesn't. Hours pass. No contact. The daughter starts spiraling into panic, and the wife tries to hold it together because the guests are arriving and she can't turn fear into spectacle. So she hosts while worrying. She smiles while imagining worst-case scenarios. She performs normality as if performance itself might keep the disaster away. The party scenes become almost painfully human. Polite chatter, nervous laughter, small talk about products and households, all floating on top of dread like oil on water. The daughter argues with her husband about what worry means. He insists that fear without proof is pointless. She insists that silence is proof enough. Their conflict is not just about the missing father. It's about emotional style. One person believes feelings are warnings you should listen to. The other believes feelings are noise you should ignore. Meanwhile, the wife is trying to keep the room calm while her mind is elsewhere, and every time the phone doesn't ring, the tension tightens again. What makes this whole stretch so memorable is the way it layers crises without letting anyone breathe. First, a neighbor's family conflict pulls them into a moral confrontation about prejudice and dignity. Then a workplace conflict exposes how fragile equality becomes when men feel threatened. Then a domestic argument about having children reveals deep fears about the world. And finally, a social gathering is haunted by the possibility that something has gone terribly wrong. The humor is still there, but it's the kind of humor that comes from discomfort, from watching people stumble through their worst instincts, and occasionally, sometimes reluctantly, do something better when the consequences finally become real. By the end, the household hasn't become perfect, and nobody has transformed into a saint. But a few key truths have been forced into the open. Pride can push a son out the door until a father realizes the door might close forever. A workplace can pretend it's about tradition until it's confronted with the reality of fairness. A marriage can pretend it's about logic until it's exposed as fear. And a party can pretend it's normal until everyone realizes that the most terrifying thing in a home is not noise, but silence. When you're waiting for someone you love to show up, and the phone refuses to answer your hope.